Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing a step-by-step institutional audit of the global fallout from Pope Leo XIV's landmark AI manifesto, Magnifica Humanitas. Now, we aren't just looking at who agreed with this text. No, we're digging really very deeply into who actually gains power by agreeing with it. You see, this manifesto dropped as a religious document, a political warning, and honestly, a massive meme generator. But at its core, it's about us, human beings placed under immense pressure by systems built to classify, predict, and command our lives. Let's get right into it.
To figure out exactly how moral language translates into actual power, we're going to follow a chronological roadmap across 6 key sectors. We'll look at the Vatican stage, Palantir and tech suspicion, the Catholic institutional test, education, children and war, media, memes, and regions, and finally, the real division. This map is what's going to determine the document's true legacy.
All right, part 1, the Vatican stage. Let's look at where the Pope's message hit its very first structural tension.
Pope Leo XIV didn't just drop a sleepy theological paper. He framed this text as a massive social intervention. And man, the speed of the first response cycle was absolutely wild. It immediately generated these forceful, punchy slogans. Things like disarm AI and technology is never neutral, which just flew rapidly through outlets like Vatican News and Reuters. Slogans like these are great for opening doors, sure, but they carry a real risk. They can easily shrink a complex, massive social manifesto into a bite-sized, easily consumed object.
And here's where it gets really fascinating. Look at the contrast between the text itself and how it was actually staged. The written document explicitly warned us against concentrated technical power. But on the actual Vatican stage, sitting right up there beside the cardinals and theologians was Christopher Olah, the co-founder of the frontier AI lab Anthropic. Talk about a double image. On the page, AI power is strictly an object of moral judgment. But on the stage, Anthropic was given this incredibly rare, highly visible moral spotlight. They basically appeared as the one tech lab that knew it needed the Pope.
And Christopher Olah's response was brilliantly modest. He leaned into something we can call the authority of humility. He didn't just stand up and claim Anthropic was acting responsibly. Actually, he confessed that AI labs are structurally tempted by commercial survival and pride. It literally sounded like a confession. And it brilliantly shows how, when a company publicly confesses its own commercial temptations, it actually gets to keep the power to host the critique. The lab itself becomes the very place where the moral critique is processed.
Moving on to part 2, Palantir and tech suspicion. We really need to talk about the tactical use of silence in the tech world.
Notice who didn't speak up right away. The silence from massive implicated powers, companies like Palantir, OpenAI, Google, DeepMind, Microsoft, Meta, xAI, not to mention military agencies and regulators, is highly strategic. By saying absolutely nothing at the start, they preserve their ability to take the manifesto's beautiful vocabulary about peace and dignity and seamlessly weave it into their own operational commands and cloud contracts later on. In their hands, peace can easily morph into deterrence. Protection becomes surveillance. Staying silent early on leaves all those pathways wide open.
Now, when the tech field did actually speak, it fractured into 3 incredibly specific tones. First, you had the safety camp. Names like Joshua Bengio and Tanishq Matthew Abraham, who totally welcomed the safety framing and treated the Vatican like an ally. Then you had David Sachs ringing the alarm bell on state capture, warning that this whole safety banner could easily become a Trojan horse for speech control and surveillance. And finally, you had the disruptionists. They just completely brushed off the labor concerns as people simply resisting progress, totally flattening the reality that human work is about rhythm, craft, and recognition, not just a paycheck.
Which brings us to part 3, the Catholic institutional test. How did the Catholic world actually react? And more importantly, how are they going to apply it?
Early on, outlets like The Pillar, America Magazine, OSV News, and CAFOD stepped up with some genuinely beautiful theological commentary. They framed Magnifica Humanitas as a much-needed, timely return to core Catholic social teaching. But look, that is just the beginning. Catholic institutions don't just sit around writing commentary on AI. They run global networks of universities, hospitals, and welfare systems. They are the ones actually buying the software.
So the absolutely crucial leap here has to be from what we'd call beautiful reception to enforceable refusal. It's not enough for bishops to just praise the encyclical. We need Catholic universities auditing their model contracts and disclosing their AI vendors. We need hospitals flat out rejecting automated triage systems that don't allow for human appeal.
A nice quote card for a school is great, but a diocese actually publishing strict AI procurement rules to defend their workers against de-skilling, now that changes the ground entirely.
All right, part 4, education, children, and war. Let's look at the real human stakes as this manifesto takes on the extraction machines in our schools and on the battlefield.
Take education, for example, which got some great coverage in the Houston Chronicle. The classroom perfectly highlights what's at risk here. AI totally flips learning on its head by spitting out a perfectly polished output before the student even has a chance to struggle and think. The manifesto fiercely defends what it calls the interval between the answer, because, thinking actually requires a delay. Learning demands friction. If the answer just arrives fully formed on a platter, our capacity for judgment just erodes.
And that loss of friction bleeds right into children's emotional lives too. We're witnessing the explosion of synthetic intimacy, these always-on AI tutors and digital friends. Sure, they simulate a relationship, but they completely dodge the messy, mutual vulnerability of real human connection. A machine that caters to your every whim without ever pushing back can seriously stunt a child's ability to just wait for and deal with another real person.
Shifting over to the war front, the text goes straight for the throat of traditional just war theory. It insists that disarming AI can't just be an empty phrase. It means actively dismantling predictive kill chains, autonomous targeting, and those opaque military decision support systems. You can't just use ethics as a shiny cover or throw a human in the loop just for decoration on defense platforms. The language of peace is only real if it directly confronts the literal machinery of automated warfare.
Okay, part 5, media, memes, and regions. Let's track exactly how fast the internet chewed up and digested this text.
The speed of global interpretation was just staggering. First, you had headlines like The Verge declaring the Pope isn't AGI-pilled, which brilliantly dragged the conversation away from sci-fi doomsday scenarios and grounded it in actual present-day social harms. Then came the memes. Reddit and Hacker News absolutely lit up with the Pope joined Anthropic viral jokes. Meanwhile, global coverage exploded across PC Gamer, Vox, and all the way to Business Insider in India today. Honestly, the meme layer often clarified things faster than traditional journalism, showing how people realized moral authority was suddenly moving in two directions at once.
And we absolutely have to mention the independent analysts on platforms like Substack and LinkedIn who really drove this second wave of understanding. You had Thierry Breton dissecting what this means for EU policy, Zvi Moshewitz digging into the AI risk discourse, Tim O'Reilly actually setting up an AI-mediated reading of the text, and Murat Dermish pushing for pluralist coexistence, arguing that planetary AI ethics can't just rely on a single Catholic framework, it has to bridge multiple traditions. These independent voices drag the manifesto right into the gritty realities of rare earth mining and workplace automation.
Then, regional media stepped in and brought a much sharper political edge. Spain's El País introduced this incredibly vital concept of digital colonialism. It's the stark warning that when corporate tech monopolies train their models, they end up compressing beautiful, complex local languages, cultures, and histories into one generic global interface. The big takeaway here? The church has to fight tooth and nail to ensure it doesn't just become a convenient ethical wrapper for unchecked machine power.
Finally, Part 6, the real division. This brings us to the ultimate institutional test of the entire document.
So here's the reality. The true conflict isn't just a basic fight between the manifesto's supporters and its critics. That's a totally misleading surface division. The actual deep division is between turning the manifesto into concrete institutional power versus just dressing up our current power structures in the manifesto's fancy vocabulary. Are we going to see real and forcible refusal, or are we just smoothing the road for these systems to expand?
Watchdogs, like the Center for Countering Digital Hate and The Guardian, are explicitly sounding the alarm about compliance theater. This happens when tech companies just nod along fluently, dissolving any real conflict. They soften the Pope's warning by simply slapping the word dignity onto their existing workplace surveillance tools, or safety onto their military defense deployments, or they just slap some Catholic teaching onto an advisory panel, while their massive cloud contracts roll on exactly as before. Just like that, a hard warning gets twisted into soft authorization.
And so we've got to leave you with this huge, provocative question. Will Magnifica Humanitas actually grow teeth? Will it generate real veto power, hard audit rights, and forced transparency in the hospitals, border checkpoints, call centers, and server farms where AI already governs our lives? Or is it simply going to be swallowed whole, serving as a fluent, ethical halo for the exact systems it set out to critique? That right there is the definitive test of this manifesto.
Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. Keep asking those hard questions, and we'll catch you next time.